And I showed pictures here of what has happened, especially in Kibra, when it comes to, you know, having facilities and using the projects, all the monies, the CDF exhaustively. This is just one of them. School motto, knowledge is power. This is what Kibra, with the late Ken Okoth, were enjoying as far as CDF is concerned.
First, I must say that the late Ken Okoth was a visionary leader, and he used the CDF allocation to Kibra very prudently, especially in the education sector, as can be exemplified by the structures that you are seeing there, and even when you listen to the people that he represented. CDF was introduced in the 9th Parliament by a bill brought by Engineer Karue, and I think it was a master stroke of the Kibaki regime, the first such acts of devolution of national resources to the grassroots. I know people try to compare rural constituencies and what Okoth was doing in Kibra, but it's a completely different setting, because Kibra would be smaller than one sublocation in my constituency. So it's easier to put your money on one program, even for 2 years, and build it up completely, because you maybe have a countable number of schools that you are dealing with, maybe less than 4, less than 3. Some constituencies actually have 2 primary schools and 1 or 2 secondary schools within the urban setting. But in the rural setting, like I think before this we talked to the friend Amollo, and he said that his constituency has got 123 primary schools. My constituency has got 116 primary schools and 56 secondary schools. So the distribution of CDF, therefore, you have to cover all these schools. It would be unwise to come up with a structure like what Ken Okoth managed in Kibra, because then some other parts of the constituency will feel disenfranchised, that they did not get the help that they deserve. So it depends on how what sort of constituency one is representing, that will determine how you distribute your CDF funding. The other thing, when the CDF came up, it was actually supposed to be shared equitably throughout the country. Unfortunately, the last parliament changed that to equal. So you find some large constituencies that right now are actually disadvantaged. Like take a constituency like from Bungoma, the largest constituency is Kandui, represented by Wafula Wamunyinyi. It has 8 wards. It's the largest constituency that's got over 200 primary schools and about 70, 80 secondary schools. And they're getting the same amount of money like my Tongaren, which has got 6 wards and 116 primary schools. So we are getting the same amount of money. What I can achieve with that money is much more than what Wamunyinyi can achieve with this money. So if you take Webuye East with 3 constituencies, with 3 wards, and about 50 primary schools and 26 secondary schools, they can with the money we are getting, they can achieve much more than I can achieve, because we changed the sharing to equal, not equitable. So those are some of the areas on CDF that we need to look at, so that we can maybe restructure it. But generally, how CDF is utilized depends on what sort of dynamics are in that constituency. Because if you go to the semi-arid areas, some of them invest more in boarding primary schools because of the nomadic nature of the population, so that the children can be in one place. So you find them maybe investing more in boarding primary schools far from each other. But in a place like Kibra, where you might have about less than 10 primary schools or less than 10 secondary schools, one can actually manage in a space of 5 years. If you put on one project all the money in 1 year, you will see the impact. Like that's what Ken Okoth did, and that I think was very visionary of him. And it made him enemies, but it made him very many admirers and very many friends.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I've lost my sequence. Is it Otena Amollo?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
Just a couple of quick points. First of all, before the break, my friend Kimani Wamatangi Yes.
went on what I would call a passionate lamentation
Yes.
about a number of things. And before him, it was Aaron Cheriot.
Yeah.
And sometimes I sit back and wonder, the last time I checked, Jubilee controls the presidency, Jubilee controls Senate, Jubilee controls the National Assembly. So when those members, prominent members of Jubilee, engage in lamentations,
Yes.
then I do not know what the rest of those, like in the minority like us, should do. Maybe Kenyans should listen to this a little more in terms of their decision making next time. Secondly,
Maybe Omatangi should become the poster child of the Book of Lamentations in the Bible.
Secondly, Dibal, wait, Senator Omatangi. Let's make this clear about the Physical Planning Act. The Physical Planning Act is law, and it is not even new law. The Physical Planning Act has always been law since even before independence,
since 1962.
In its various forms,
Yes.
so that in 1963, then it became one of the laws that were adopted. What has happened is that with time it's amended. I think it was amended in 96, then in 2010, then in 2017, which is what you are showing. But even in 2019, the amendments that have been sought to be introduced. But that's not the problem. The problem is not the law. The law is there. The problem is enforcement. What we don't need is, like, if you see a copy of the Standard, the governor of Nairobi is now disclosing how rotten that city inspectorate is.
Today's Standard.
How does that help us? Because if that is true, he should have acted by now. He should be telling us the people who are identified and who have been charged or removed from office. He should not be lamenting, like the rest of us, that that place is corrupt, which is what's causing the death of our children. Thirdly, I think in fairness to our colleagues where this tragedy happened, we must create a distinction between public and private schools. This was a private school, and it's not a public school. So there's a limit to what the member of parliament can do, because you cannot go into a private school and start adjusting or putting public money in it. But that said, what the late Ken Okoth did was good. With the difficulties and distinctions that Dr. Eseli Simo has created, still there's much merit to say that there's need to invest in schools. In my constituency, for example, we have purposed to invest at least 70% of the CDF money to schools in terms of establishing facilities and also in terms of bursaries. And that's for primary, secondary, and even tertiary institutions. Because for some of those areas, we have discovered that what we need to focus on is improving the quality of what's already there rather than establishing them in terms of numbers. We are not doing badly in numbers. As I told you, we have 123 primary schools and 56 secondary schools. For the region of Rarieja, that is not bad. But there's the problem for those in the city, as I explained, I think is the question of land. What our colleagues in the city must focus on is if they can work with the National Land Commission, the Ministry of Education, and find whatever little public land that was left that could possibly be used for establishing schools. Because in terms of purchase, it is extremely expensive. And in fact, the kind of money you might need to purchase land to put a school might even invite questions in terms of corruption.
But the little land that is left there also, we've had a wanton greed and people grabbing also this
Absolutely.
land. Yeah?
That's the point I'm making. We need, and you know my position on this, anyone who's grabbed public land, that land must be brought back to the public. I am as clear as that as the day. But having said that, I think that the question of Kibra is yet a further lesson. And I like the fact that we all agreed, and most people agreed, that the late Ken Okoth did very well. I think that is a message to the people of Kibra. You know who to vote for. The ODM did well in Kibra, and ODM will continue doing well in Kibra.
All right. But Haman Manyora is asking here, I should tell our panelists that such schools, even worse ones, exist all over the country, including close to public schools. That Kenyans are taking their children to such schools is a testimony of how little faith there is in public schools. And right now, when we're talking about 100% transition, this is what is really happening, that our public schools cannot really accommodate. People now are going to, that's the reason we are having all this spawning ground. We can see this rickety structures really coming up in the names of schools as well. How have we felt? I'm a product of a public school as well, and by then we had very nice public schools. What is really happening with the current regime in terms of trying to, when we're talking about school for all, 100 transition, will we see more death drops because schools cannot really accommodate the numbers, and now we have rickety structures coming all along? Is it Aaron Chiriot?
Yeah, it's
you,
my turn.
please.
Well, Dibal, the issue is about competing interests. Because, you know, of course, with population explosion and numbers that we are having currently in the country of kids that needs to go to school, of course, you're bound to have a strain on the public school. But that is not to excuse this kind of institutions that are coming up. I'm not sure how my contribution in the mind of Otiende Amollo becomes a lamentation, because I was very clear on one thing. I said we are demanding, we have provided the legislation to City Inspectorate, and you pointed out to the physical planning bill that was passed in both houses of parliament, you know, National Assembly and the Senate, and I made my contribution. And I said, secondly, the place where we'll demand answers, at National Assembly, they passed the Basic Education Act, which provides for the requirements of what it is that can pass as a school to be used by school children in Kenya. Therefore, by demanding answers from these institutions, how is that lamentation? Surely, Otiende Amollo, even if you wanted to scapegoat and lay blame on me, you know. Secondly, you must choose a struggle, Otiende. You know, since the handshake, you lost your voice as an opposition MP. You are the biggest cheerleader of the president of this forum, more than myself, even who is a member of his party. So sometimes you must weigh what to struggle with and what not to struggle with. On this particular issue, as a senator, basic education is in the purview of National Assembly. Of course, sometimes I can do only as much, but the truth of the matter, if there is a person who can really put to task the Ministry of Education officials, it's only you and the Seli. There's very little that Kimani Wamatangi, and if I'm lying, Jaco, you'll help me. You understand how this constitution works. Therefore, let us not scapegoat. Let us be leaders and speak the particular truth. We must continue to seriously invest. And by the way, I hear people criticize the MP KJ. I have seen him on Times Without Number. I think he even has a petition in Parliament about this particular ward in his constituency, where he talks about the challenges of availability of land. You understand how some of these urban constituencies, almost every space is built up. Therefore, when people say, oh, he ought to have done something with his CDF, you wonder, with that allocation of 100 and is it 110 or 120 million to buy land in an urban area, then perhaps that will mean that that's the only thing that he will do. I have seen him present petitions to Parliament about this particular issue, and it's unfortunate that this has happened before that could be realized.
Which brings the question to the legislation itself, the Physical Planning Act. Mm-hmm. How come we have all these buildings mushrooming every which way, and we don't have any safe spaces, you know, or land allocated for schools, you know, and other amenities, you know, for children as well, you know, parks as well? I think these are some of the things we need to raise as legislators.
But, you know, the tragedy has occurred. I think we need to figure out which way forward. I saw the other day a constituency in Coast Province without a single classroom, a constituency, which begs of the question, where are the authorities to audit activities of CDF in those places? You know, when there's nothing in a whole constituency in terms of education, and you want those people to grow up to be Kenyans. The teachers live in pathetic scenarios. The students don't have any learning facilities. It is not that CDF has failed, but I think it is. I think it will not be without basis to criticize the misuse of it.
Maybe the problem question will be then, who oversights CDF? Who oversights CDF?
Well, CDF is a public fund.
Yes, it is a public fund. But
there's Auditor General. Then
but the Auditor General, he comes at the tail end of it, after the money has been spent. But in terms of custody of the money, we know there is a committee, yes. But who also oversights these the particular committees?
The law, the CDF Act was amended,
yes,
to the extent that now the person doing the oversight, there is a committee headed by the MP. separate from the CDF committee, because the MP is not supposed to be on the CDF committee anymore. So there's the committee that
It is headed by the MP.
that implements. Then there is an oversight committee by the MP and several other people. I think it depends on the size of the constituency. You form the oversight committee and ensure that those projects are being implemented.
But the
now
idea,
that's where Jacoyo,
yes.
that's where Jacoyo is right. If an MP is not up to the task, then that kind of scenario that Jacoyo is saying happens, and you find that some projects are not
were we
implemented.
not meant to actually uncouple the MPs from the CDF?
Well, if you
Because I think
read
that's the
law,
biggest debate,
the part Dr. is talking about, I don't know. But I recently read the CDF Act. All I know is that the MP is not mentioned anywhere.
So how is he coming on the oversight committee, as you're mentioning? I don't know that particular amendment that you're talking about.
I just read that thing like a couple months ago. But
there is an oversight committee.
Yes.
On that act, and when the MP was removed from the CDF, an oversight committee was put in place. So they are about, depending on the size of the constituency, they can range from 4 to 5 members.
So you were saying, if I heard you right, that the oversight committee was actually created, MP was removed.
Yeah.
The oversight committee came in its place.
Yeah.
But you're saying also the MP is
on the oversight.
Is on the oversight committee.
Yes.
Which I think you were speaking from both sides of the mouth.
No. Citing, because the MP...
I mean, we had followed a good trajectory because we all have something to say. So when the discussion is coming this way, so let's also have our say. Then when it gets back to you can say what you have to say, and that's the rule. That's the rule. So let Jacob finish.
Jacob, you finish, then we continue the Matangi.
Yes. But I wanted to say that CDF has helped, like Honorable Tiende is saying. How they have used it in terms of education. I was an MP throughout my tenure there was CDF. And I can tell you in a game, I took over when there were 102 primary schools. I left when there are 158. And there were 8 secondary schools. I left when there are 62. And we have built police stations. We have done. So it's not that it is a bad thing. I just happen to think going forward, as we deal with corruption in the counties, I think MPs need to concentrate in Nairobi. I really think we are working against ourselves by giving MPs power over monies. It is contradicting the vision of devolution, and I think the governors need to deal with those things, with the MCS.
Thank you. Yeah. And of course, we've seen this fight between the governors and the MPs, especially over projects where it has been funded maybe by the county, and the MPs want to come also and preside over maybe during the launch as well. Kimano Matangi, you are the custodians also of devolution. Where does this snugly fit in, especially within your custody?
Well, why don't you let me, could I start by donating 1 minute to Otiende Amollo?
To clarify.
Because
I accept that donation.
There and that I was lamenting passionately. I know he was looking for an opportunity to to circumvent what he knew I was going to automatically remind him about, and that is about marriage vows. The marriage vows have not changed Otiende Amollo. It is in good and in bad times, in sickness and in health, through thick and thin, sick and sin. So this marriage that we call the handshake. So anything that you blame me for or Jubilee for, you're equally guilty. That is that is the law. But anyway, on a serious note, my comment that my good friend Otiende has christened lamentations are serious observations to me, and my observations are solid in my conscience, that we cannot continue to treat a certain class of society, and especially children as of yesterday, as though they are children of a lesser God. Because we have the opportunity to take our children to private schools that are in urban places where you pay fees of $1 million and children have 5-course meals, and we forget the truth and the reality that in those slums, that those people are Kenyans who also give birth to children, and that those children have a right, just like the child of a member of parliament or a cabinet secretary. And that's what I was saying, that consistently, and this is where the blame is, consistently, and that's why it is also wrong to blame Jubilee or any administration. If you talk to any person who is a stakeholder in the education sector, who has experienced enough, probably 10, 20 years, talk to head teachers. They'll tell you, principals of secondary schools. Consistently, there has been the misplaced priority where under allocation has been the name of the game to that particular sector and to that ministry. There is no time. I mean, the evidence is there. Why is it that you find that the one sector of employment that has been endlessly in turmoil are the teachers? Why is it always the teachers striking? It's evidence that not enough resources are allocated to the education sector. Why is it that we have all these cases like I mentioned before? And it is not only in this government, it is consistently that we have not gotten it right to realize that we are better off investing more in our education sector and scale down in others. And that is why you find, unless that is addressed, we can continue to blame anyone we want to blame, the fellow who wears green going to inspect how the school is built, blame the teachers there, blame the poor fellows who have to only put up with the resources that they have and put up a ramshackle that they call a school. If you go and check the quality of education in those schools, leave alone the security, it is pathetic. I mean, because there are no standards. And what my lamentation or Tende Amollo is that we must see the bigger picture. It is not right that we would say that government sees society in various spectra of color, and there's a certain color for those that have and a different color for those that don't have. And it is all right to say that the ministry sent money to all secondary schools which are called public, which are recognized, and the others that are unrecognized. And yet it is Kenyans who go to those schools. That was my point. But then coming to the CDF discussion, Dibal, I think if you look at the entire country, across every constituency or sub-county as it is now, evidence is there that some of the most useful projects to community have been taken or undertaken or constructed under CDF. They have done good work in some. Of course, others they have abused. And the problem with CDF has always been the lawfulness of it. How you make it lawful, how you anchor it, alongside proper laws in our statute, the Public Finance Management Act, our Constitution, to ensure that fund is lawfully administered and also dispensed. If that is sorted, CDF is a good thing. Now, if you look at the small machinations that are being described by various members of the National Assembly, what was done, and you can see this in the way CDF projects now are labeled. If you go to a CDF project now, it's labeled GF, and then NG-CDF. I mean, trying to bring in a concept of national government, to blur or gray that area and still make it look like a national government project, and it's still administered under the law. While ideally, and the argument has always been that CDF should have been channeled through the county government, now that there's a county government that's there. And that's the conflict we've been talking about. However, governors have not dispensed or discharged themselves adequately to make a case that they are good enough to administer CDF. That's true. Because they themselves, with the little they have received, they are not only victims, but they're also culprits, major culprits. And so you can't make a realistic case right now and say that if you took CDF to them, they will do what members of the National Assembly are not doing. I believe what should be done rightly by members of the National Assembly is to find the correct framework. And even when they talk about committees that they have formed at a grassroots level to administer the fund,
thank you.
This in many cases is really just a camouflage. Most of the committee is still largely selected and responsible and answerable to the member of the National Assembly. If this fund can be given to members of the National Assembly, but they let it be dispensed completely independently for purposes of ensuring that development goes to the people down there, then CDF will still be a good thing.
Where is the place of the Senate in this? Where is the place of the Senate?
Yeah.
Where is the place of the Senate?
I mean, the Senate is an oversight body. And if you look at the time, any time when we even agitated to have any funding to the Senate, it is only for purposes of oversight.
Thank you.
I mean, in the Senate, we have accepted our role, that our work is to oversight.
Right, we need to bring it to a close. Otieno Amollo, you wanted to get a rejoinder?
Yeah, not quite a rejoinder, just to clarify.
Briefly, clarity. A minute on this.
Yes, I wanted us to be clear. CDF funds are still audited by the Auditor General. And every period you find that they audit a series of constituencies, and then those constituencies are raised together. But the role for the Member of Parliament, there's a role for the Member of Parliament, but it's more of monitoring in my view, not so much the audit. But the second point I wanted to make, Dibal, is that for me, this is not a question of auditing. This is a question of priority. Whether you put money in schools or not, is not so much, audit is just the use of money. But which area you put money to is a question of priority. And that priority, as we've lamented, part of the issue is land. So I think it's quite apt now that we discuss the Ruaraka land, that I think you've been postponing the discussion.
Yes, yes. Let's go to Ruaraka. And before I do that, let me just read these tweets and then we go to Ruaraka as well. We have Philip, we have Salim here. Okay, I wonder who is this. Is Dr. Dimitri. We have Dr. Dimitri here, right? Please tell Dr. Dimitri, this is, it should be a Sally or what? Another panelist, that it's not the number of schools that matter. It is about priorities. Kibra constituency has so many public schools, but Honorable Ken Okoth, may his soul remain in eternal paradise, had priorities that he used to put right. We have also Dr. Andrew Sule, MD, saying in the case of the poor learning infrastructure, media has every right to hold the duty bearer to task on this sad incident of a collapsed building in Dagoretti. Also, we do have John Giranga saying it's ironical and also very unfortunate that we are talking about Vision 2030, yet we are still grappling with basics, with innumerable buildings all over the country that are built hurriedly with substandard materials with the aim of making quick money. Also, we have Alvin Aboki saying, I think Simiyu is not genuine. What if during your reign you construct at least one building like the one the late Ken Okoth did? Then when another candidate takes over, does the same, and so on and so forth. Right? This is what Alvin Aboki is worried or concerned about. Also, we have Gabriel Njuguna saying the government should revamp public primary schools to make them attractive. Mushrooming of private primary schools has compromised the quality of education infrastructure.